I mean, I could sit here and talk about Halloween all day, but yeah.
I'm here to teach. So, since we talked about course selection for next semester, which would be the spring, these are the other GIS courses offered at Fitchburg State. Well, actually, the first one is this class. You guys took this one, check. It's actually a prerequisite for some of the other ones, like 400. These numbers might have changed, but I'm pretty sure the titles are all the same. So if you go into whatever the health program you have to do it, you can search for the name, and it should come up. So map use and interpretation sounds like a wicked easy elective that you could like pass with flying colors now that you took this. GIS for criminal justice might be cool if you're interested in crime reporting. Computer cartography, I think all of you would excel at. All of your maps looked great from Lab 7. Urban geography, I don't know, that one sounds a little difficult, but it might be fun. It's also just straight up GIS. So if you loved working with ArcGIS Pro, take that class. It's great. There's remote sensing, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Woohoo! And there's also some computer science courses you might be interested in, 1 and 2, and then web programming. And if you complete a certain number of these, you can like minor in GIS. Not sure if there's a certificate. It might be a certificate. And then if you combine it with some of these, then there's like, I don't know if it's a major and you can like double major in GIS, but yes. I have to tell you, it's not difficult. If you want some, well, I don't think it is. That's also why I got my master's in it. If it's something that comes naturally to you, go for it. It's one of the highest paying up and coming job markets. Technology, yes. Ooh, okay, recap from last time. We talked about geocoding, and one of the most common forms of geographic data is the address, which usually shows up in lists, like an Excel spreadsheet. Geocoding lets us create a point feature for every address referenced in space. We use one of those geocoding databases, usually from the Census Bureau, to do that. Moving on from geocoding, let's talk about remote sensing, which is things like satellite images. It also includes, which the book hasn't gone into yet, but I think it does in the future, sonar, which is sound waves bouncing off of things, like bats use. Radar, which airplanes use to see what's around them. There's something outside the window. LiDAR, which is bouncing those light beams off of things on Earth to get an image, a 3D image of them. There's acoustic monitoring, which is kind of like sonar, but slightly different in whatever methods it is. I don't actually know what the difference is. Ships use sonar, yep. They use it to both see other ships around and things under the water that they don't want to hit, all sorts of things like that. So remote sensing, you think of it very simply as getting information about an object without physical contact. So you're not going out and you're measuring the trees by hand. You're using something like a terrestrial LiDAR to determine what their diameter is. Similarly, you're not going out and looking at the algae blooms in the ocean. You're seeing it from satellite images. So it's different to on-site observation. We do this now on Mars. We're remote sense things on Mars. Actually, that's the only way we can do things on Mars because we're not there. Any extraterrestrial things are remote sensed. And also things in like the middle of the Amazon jungle where scientists can't go out there. We remote sense a lot of that stuff. There's a really great lecture by a researcher at Arizona State University about gold mining in the Amazon and how without remote sensing, we wouldn't be able to tell where these areas are so that we can stop it because it's a legal protected area. I will either show you that video next class or load it up to Blackboard. Because it's actually really cool and it goes into LiDAR, which is like one of my favorite things about remote sensing. But first, let's talk about the history. So the first aerial photograph for surveying the landscape was done in France in 1858. A few years later, James Wallace Black took photographs of Boston from a balloon. Hold on. I know that this slide has a whole bunch of notes, which I do not have up.
I remember from reading yesterday the first one plane was 1900.
Planes were not invented yet.
Okay, well, I thought that's what it said.
Did it like it said pigeons had cameras strapped to them?
Or, in 1908,
1908 airplanes. Cool. So
in France.
in France.
So I don't know if France was not the answer. What?
All right. So the first one was 1858. It no longer exists, but it was clearly the beginning of something big. And then James Wallace Black took photographs from a balloon in Boston. And it set the stage for using aircrafts for aerial photography. We'll get to the planes. We're going to talk about kites now. So in 1906, there was a huge earthquake in San Francisco. And who was it? George Lawrence sent a series of cameras up on kites, and the elevation is disputed. Your book says something different from what the internet says. But he sent cameras up, and I'm going to turn off the lights because it's a lot easier to see these. There we go. Images with no lights. So he took this, and you could see the fire damage all across the city. Then we go to wartime stuff. So Union spies used aerial photography during the Civil War, which was a long, long time ago, to observe the Confederate soldiers. This is not that. This is a picture of 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis showing the fuel tanks and the missile shelters in Cuba. So Cuba was saying, we don't have missiles, we don't know what you're talking about. Was it the Russians that put the missiles on Cuba? I don't remember. Anyways, I know it was Kennedy, and we found the missiles using aerial imagery. But in the Civil War, they strapped cameras to pigeons, and they sent them over the Confederate troops to see where they were. If the pigeons came back, they developed film, they could see what the troops looked like. Sometimes at that point it was too late, but it was the start of something. During World War II, they started using infrared photography to detect camouflage weapons on the ground. So both trees, for example, bushes, and green painted camouflage look the same from the air. So using infrared photos was this great new technology so they could see them, because vegetation and whatever bonds in with them, assuming metal, give off different wavelengths. And also during World War II, the invention of radar enabled the Allies to win against the Luftwaffe Air Force. And many historians believe that Britain was saved by the advanced warning of incoming German planes during the Blitz. Modern remote sensing evolved in the 1960s as a byproduct of the space program. And today, satellites and computers collect data in many wavelengths. Why? I have a link in my notes to, more pictures of the Cuban Missile Crisis. So if you guys are interested in seeing more pictures of the Cuban Missile Crisis, feel free to talk to me later and I'll send you that link. All right, so what are your questions so far about the history of remote sensing?
How did they like get that camera? Just like they're like, what am I like? I don't like these cameras.
I can't imagine the cameras are light. They're pretty heavy. If you've ever seen like a vintage camera, they're pretty heavy. So really big height? Maybe a hot air.
They also make small ones for pigeons.
They did make small ones for pigeons. Yeah, so maybe small cameras. I don't know. That's a really good question. Yeah. Well, if you Google it, and I'm sure they have pictures of the camera somewhere in a museum. Awesome. So while you're Googling that, I'm going to talk about Lab 9. So, is this a pigeon with a camera stuck to it? Oh my goodness. Oh, okay. So before we talk about Lab 9, we're going to look at pictures of pigeons.
It's so cute. Pigeons are the best.
What did you Google?
I looked
Yep,
at
there it is.
camera
Okay.
pigeons.
So here are your remote sensing pigeons.
Are those the ones from World War II? Oh, yeah.
These are actually from the Civil War.
Oh, okay. Because I know they used to be for World War II.
That's a little black cow.
Yep, that little, yeah.
So dramatic.
Oh, right here, yep.
Yeah.
They also probably used them during World War II. That's pretty cool.
So cute.
That is, yeah, that's very cute. That's the camera.
Oh.
Wow.
Those are pretty cool.
Yeah. He had a patent in it in 1908. It kept going till the 1930s. Yep. The war penguins were in use. This, yeah. That is really cool.
I wish I was the one that made pigeons.
Maybe you can like strap a
Is there
GoPro
like
to
a
it.
timer for the camera, like for when it's gonna go off? Or?
I would assume so. Details remain classified.
Okay. Well, it is a war weapon. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there must have been some sort of timing mechanism. FedEx pigeon. He did this because he wanted to know where his carrier pigeons went. Right, and so the other question was the camera strapped to a kite.
Yeah.
Well, so those obviously were little cameras. Let's see.
This won't be as cute.
No. Oh. It looks like maybe it was, it was on from a ship, so that's pretty cool. He had a selfie stick, essentially. Well, it says he's triggered the camera by shooting a battery current up to the device.
That's basically like
Yeah. So he did all of these different ones. There was a ballooning contest in Chicago. That's cool. So it doesn't, I don't think that picture of that big camera, was it that? Maybe it is. It does look like,
They were flying you by boat,
yeah,
so then there's like a lot of wind behind it. So they
Right.
would like that.
so this is the camera.
Looks like the
It's-
size of like a TV.
Right, it does look like the size of a TV. This is the kite assembly he had above it. Yeah. So, and there's a map of the burned area. So that's what that aerial picture is of. So, great question about the history. Of remote sensing. Yeah, oh no, I totally, that was awesome. Now I have more things to add to my slides in the future. Who doesn't want to look at pigeons? They're really cute. Do you have any other questions about the history of remote sensing? Okay.
I don't know.
There's no more pigeons here on out.
Oh,
But if you want to go through the internal review board to get permission to strap cameras to pigeons,
oh my goodness, when they do that.
we can send, yeah. My advisor in my master's program actually did his PhD at Texas A&M, and he got funded to get a remote sensing blimp. So now they have a remote sensing blimp down there, which is nuts. And now at UMass, he got funding to get a bunch of drones. So they have a bunch of drones. So maybe the future of this department lays in some remote sensing things. That would be pretty cool. All right. Actually, let me go back one slide because there's things to say. All right, take a look at each of the following images and try to determine just what it is you're looking at. So Lab 9 is not going to be an assignment on Blackboard. We're going to do it together. And I don't know, maybe I'll give bonus points or something for all of you and people up online that showed up. Like seriously, as long as you're doing the quizzes in the labs, even if your grade looks terrible on Blackboard, you're doing fine. All right. Several images may contain multiple items. They all work together to develop one key solution. Next. All right. So what is being displayed in this image? What elements lead you to draw this conclusion? So first, let's look at the image as a whole for things to identify. You guys can discuss this. What do you see in this picture? There is water. Yep.
Like, courtyard thing.
There's a courtyard thing. Yep. Does some kind of building?
It looks like an observatory.
Looks like maybe an observatory. At least there's this round thing, which is kooky. Suspicious. Yes. Yes. And look at the size of the cars in relation to the building. So is the building big or little?
That's a big building.
That's a big building. And you can also look at the shadow
The trees.
in the trees. Yep. And you see that it's a big building. And it's on a body of water.
Probably quite a lot.
So it's not moving. Some sort of what?
Some sort of like lab or something.
A lab, maybe? Mhm.
It's kind of like-
Also, the shape of this courtyard thing is pretty unique. A bunch of concentric circles. All right. So now start looking for specifics.
Top of the building looks open.
Yep. Yeah, it looks like maybe there's a rooftop something.
I think it's kind of like white, so there's a bunch around it.
True.
So it's kind of like private property.
We're never gonna find this. So, does this remind you of anything? Like vintage audio material or devices?
Like the real.
Record player. Yes, it looks like a record player. You were close with the reel,
No
yes.
way. Oh my god,
Yep.
that's crazy.
The texture of the triangular portions of the building suggests that they can be transparent. So I guess the shadow looks like maybe there's lots of glass on that building. There's no parking lot, or like is this little bitty parking lot. The large body of water could include buildings in a large city. Yeah, right?
I don't see how that.
I don't see the relationship either, but it's something I want you to notice. Yeah, very cool. So, it's probably not a monument because it's too big.
It's not like forest.
It's not, yep, it's not in a forested area. It's not like a casino or a resort or an office or a shopping center because there's no not enough parking.
Or like, is it like an insert?
Nope, the music, the record player courtyard is kind of the key, I guess. Yeah. So, it's something music related. So I guess we can start by Googling music related buildings on the shores of a lake. Those of you at home have any idea what this image is of? I would never get this from this image.
No way, I've been here.
Have you?
Yes,
What is it?
the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yep, you got it.
I've been here before.
Did you ever think that's what it looks like from the top? When you were there, did you know that the courtyard looked like a record player?
No.
Yeah, I
Do
would,
you think that somewhere they would like told us?
right?
Part of me is like, why does that matter? But then I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool, but like no one knows that.
Nobody would know it from the ground.
Oh yeah, okay.
So it is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Bravo, I went to a different Hall of Fame. Oh, that's.
Oh, you went to a different one? All right. Well,
The
anyways,
one in Tennessee, there's a
gotcha.
different music hall of fame.
Cool. So this is the one on the shore of Lake Erie, but I have no idea which Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that is. Because yes, there are more than one. I've been to the Hard Rock Cafe in New York. It's like cool shaped. All right, how about this one? We're gonna start off easy and go harder and harder. Yeah.
The arch.
Yep. It's the Gateway Arch in St. Louis. How did you know?
Because I know that it's very thin and you could also see the shadow.
Yep. My shadow is kind of the dead giveaway.
I didn't get into like that big glass thing on the top. There's like something on the top.
Yeah, there's something on the top. I don't know what it is either. But here. So sports, yes, something sports. Can you tell what kind of a court that is?
Tennis?
Tennis. Yep.
Which
Yep.
probably like
They're all tennis courts. The US Open, yes. Yep. The US Open in Flushing Meadows, New York. So how can you tell?
They plan cement courts in the US.
Okay, they plan cement courts, does no one else plan on cement courts anywhere?
Not any of the big majors now.
Not any of the big ones, all right, thank God you're here. So I'm like, meh, like, I know this is a stadium, because like, I watch football, but that's about it.
What takes it away?
Yeah, yeah, so those must be all practice courts.
It's
Cool.
way smaller.
So it says that this is distinctive because all of the other major tennis tournaments are not held in the US. And all of these images that we're going through are within the US. Plus the concrete. Yeah. There's a tennis museum in Newport that's really cool if you ever make it down there. But it's grass. Ooh, how about this one? Church.
Probably not.
What church?
Is it, it's one of the ones in probably right to
LA, all of the images are in the US.
the, oh, okay. Is that one nearby?
Near, no, it's a, I guess it's a pretty famous photo though. I've never heard of it. Hmm?
It's St. Michael's.
No.
That's even in the US. Yeah, St. Michael's, I know this because I went there for school, so I can affirm it, but that's not what St. Michael's looks like, it's very ugly, actually.
Right, and it's a city, right?
It's in North Andover, yeah.
All right, so we can notice from here, there's lots of green space. So it's probably not in this, I don't want to say it's not in the city because it is in a major city, but it's in a major city that has a lot of green space.
Oh,
There's,
it's St. Patrick's.
no, it's not St. Patrick's. It also looks like maybe that's an underground parking garage up there.
Yeah, that's not the same.
So let's look up cathedrals in the US that have an underground parking garage that are cross shaped. Ooh, it's cross shaped. I never would have noticed that either. Yeah, that like trying my it's funny. The shadows also show that there are spires and architecture that you can't really see from the aerial view. And also, there's not a whole lot of parking, so maybe it's not one that's used for masses. Cross-shaped churches with underground parking. It could still be used for masses. I have no idea. You found it?
I found it, it's the Cathedral of the Holy Cross in its garage. I think. Oh, wait, no, it's not, there's another church with its garage. That's so stupid,
Okay.
I think. Because it doesn't,
What if I tell you that this one's in Washington, D.C.? Does that help?
you would have lied. Is Washington, wait, never mind, don't answer that question. I'm stupid.
Oh, no.
I always thought Washington DC was like a state, but I don't know.
It's like the Vatican.
Washington National.
National Cathedral, yes. There you go. I thought it was hard. You would never have known that unless I gave you the hint of the town.
It does look like something.
It does. It looks like something from Europe. It's got that Gothic styling. This is not an art class though, so we won't get into that. How about this one? What can you tell about it?
Wait, is that? No.
It's Ellis Island, yes. Yes. How do you know?
Well, I was there in February, and also I know there's not a lot of grass in the buildings that are orange.
Yeah. That is pretty unique about it. The roofs are all orange. There's what's on the ground?
That's water.
No, the brown. You said there's not a lot of grass.
Oh, that's
It's like
dead grass, yeah.
I think it probably has something to do with how it's on the water.
Yeah.
It's also, this photograph was taken in either fall or winter. You can tell that there are no leaves on the trees.
Kind of smell.
You can also see how like it's just a big dock. There's only one bridge. Live on Ellis Island. I think there might be a couple of caretakers. And they're doing construction on a lot of these buildings because these were like dormitories and quarantines during plagues and stuff. So there's probably construction workers that live on there currently. Actually, it's been 4 years since I've been, so they might be done with construction. I don't know. It's mostly a big museum. And Chris, do you remember the monuments around the circle here? It has a list of everybody that came through Ellis Island.
I only went on the statue delivery. I didn't go on here.
Okay, gotcha.
It was about up there.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, there are monuments all the way around this circle that list everybody that came through Ellis Island.
When people were like,
Yep, when people were migrating. Yep. Not everybody came through Ellis Island. Some people came through the St. Lawrence River, up through Maine. That's how my family got here. But this was one of the main ways people came over. There was huge influxes. There was Irish potato famine, where a lot of people left. Yeah, that's how my ancestors from Ireland came here. In Italy, there was a huge overpopulation problem and there wasn't enough food. So people would come over. That's how my grandfather's side came. There were stonemasons. So a lot of the structures in Boston, like my grandpa built. There were lots of people who came over right around the time of the plague. I don't think they went through Ellis Island though. I don't know that that was. I'm not sure what years Ellis Island was actually in use. So that's definitely a history lesson for another time. Let's talk more about remote sensing. This is a crazy building. Any idea what this is? I mean, I don't expect you to just guess. What do you notice?
there's a ring.
It's a ring, right? Okay, so let's search for donut-shaped buildings. That would be hilarious. No, it's not. What else do you notice about things around it?
There's a lot of, like main roads.
Big roads, yeah, 4-lane roads.
You'd be surprised how many donut-shaped buildings
There are there a lot of donut-shaped buildings?
This donut-shaped skyscraper
I just want to make sure nobody's, okay. Those of you at home, feel free to unmute and jump in if you know what this donut-shaped building is. It also looks like it's pretty tall. If you look at the shadow, it's really tall. So donut-shaped buildings in a city that are really tall. It looks like it's also white.
What, Mike?
White?
That's one.
Did you find one?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden. That's part of the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. I've never been.
There's a building next to it
There's a building next to it.
that looks kind of like there's a lot of people. Like it kind of looks like like the composers on a map.
Yep.
So fancy and it has all the. That's kind of what it looks like. It's just like. Lawrence River.
Cool. I'll have to look that up later.
Right on the right or on the left. Where the seats are.
Oh, yeah. That is really cool.
I really like the picture coming out.
So the building directly to the left of this photo is really cool looking too. So if you look up the Hirshhorn Museum in DC, that's another one. I haven't been to DC, so I don't know if this is on any of the tours, but
I don't think so. I didn't see it.
Yeah. I'll have to visit sometime. All right, the next one might be easy for someone who visited it. Come on. Next slide. What is this one? It is a giant pyramid, but because it's in the US, what is it? Nope, not Vegas. Not in DC, no. It's funny, it says that there are lots of pyramid-shaped buildings in the US, including one in Vegas. But this one is on the water, which is, yep, it's in the US. It's a giveaway. Water, lots of parking, so it's probably visited a lot. It's a major destination. Local little pyramids in the US. It looks like maybe it's glass, but I can't really tell. No, I can't tell you if that was not in my notes. Is it on a body of water? It is Memphis, yes. The Pyramid Arena in Memphis, Tennessee. Does it lights up?
Yeah, on like the other side.
Whoa, that's really cool. So, it lights up.
That vibrant.
All right, this is a hard one.
That's that harbor.
It is, yes, Pearl Harbor.
That's the museum.
It's the USS Arizona Memorial.
That's like immediately. That was like one of my favorite things to learn about.
Really? Cool. The tone of the water shows it's not, the tone of the water shows that it's not that deep.
It's very shallow.
Yep, 40 feet of water, it says.
Oh.
I thought that was gonna be hard. 40 feet.
Not really good. Very
All right.
good.
This one might be a little more difficult. Obviously, it's a boat. This one's not underwater.
That's not a historical.
It is,
Oh, is
I
it?
think it's historical.
Is that the Constitution?
That's
Yeah.
not the Constitution. The Constitution is a sailboat. Wow, or it's like an old
Oh my God.
sailboat.
Make you feel better. I was trying to see if it was the Constitution. Because
No, that looks like a
Civil War. Probably the war's only done.
Battleship.
Battleship.
Yes, it is a battleship. So it's the USS Wisconsin in Norfolk, Virginia. It's a battleship. It had 3 sets of 16-inch guns, but it's decommissioned. It's a museum now. It's permanently attached to the dock, or at least permanently enough. There's probably some expansion to it and stuff, but yeah. The large open area to the south indicates some sort of pedestrian walkway, except you're right, the Constitution looks very much like this, especially all of these like plazas and there's a building here.
Kind of looks like the area like in Boston around.
Right, yep, yep. And then like Bunker Hill would be over here,
Yeah.
but this is in Virginia. They might have been modeled after one another.
The Constitution is very.
It is, yes. You have a chance to visit it, definitely do that. How about, ooh, what happened? Too much. How about this one? What do you notice?
It's very green.
It's very green, okay.
Water and.
Yeah. It's an island. It is an island. This is a really famous island.
Unlike everyone else, I've never been there.
You've never been to an island?
Well, I've never lied. But I've never been to like Canada.
Famous island, huh?
George's Island is named Island. I've never been to Snake Island is one of the big ones.
Angel Island.
What else did you notice?
There are like a couple of buildings.
There's some buildings. Now, if you look at the size of this boat, I'm assuming this is a pretty big boat. So that means this building is giant.
Can you tell us the state?
California. So the shape of it shows that it's a natural island. It's not man-made like Ellis Island.
It doesn't look like it's very like. There isn't. It doesn't look like it's one that you just don't use in the front. Kind of like it doesn't look like there's much to it other than the buildings.
Right. So there's not a whole lot of people on it currently. I think that you can visit it, although I'm not positive about that. I know I've watched TV shows where they visited it. I don't know. What? Yes, it's Alcatraz.
Oh, that's.
Yep. So this, you can see is fenced in right in the middle here. That's the outdoor prison yard.
That's actually kind of interesting. That is cool. Yeah. I mean, dare I say they got good view, right? At least they have a.
If you look at the shadows, you can identify guard towers. Single large water tower and smaller guard tower in the east, along with walls around the outdoor yard.
There's that one next to the outside. Yeah,
That's a water tower, definitely.
And then
That looks like it's probably a power plant with a smokestack.
yeah.
I guess it could be a guard tower, but I would expect a guard tower to actually be smaller than a water tower like this.
There aren't many shadows. It looks like there's a guard tower by the dock. Like
This one too. That's either a lighthouse or a guard tower. Where were you saying? By the dock?
Yeah, but I don't think we'd be able to see it.
Okay. Yeah. So they took this at an angle or at a time of day where there weren't really long shadows, so it's harder to determine. Forget if there's cloud cover. There's like some correctioning you can do in this cloud cover, but when it's intense, then it's much harder. How about this one? So this is in the US, and you can see it's some sort of
Honestly, I recognize that
star.
Yeah, it looks like, I don't know what they're called, but like people throw these stars. Yeah, it looks like a ninja star.
Okay, it looks like a ninja star, yeah.
I call myself out, but it looks like it's kind of like going down. Oh yeah, like it's the outside shape.
Right.
Like there's kind of like stairs or something that like it's like going down.
So that's either stairs or maybe a wall.
Yeah,
I'm uncertain.
Inside it looks like it's cement, like the wall.
Oh, looks like these walls are cement
Yeah.
and very thick. So what kind of structure would have thick cement walls maybe on a hill? What?
Not a prison. Or
It could have been a prison. I'm sure they kept prisoners there.
or like a castle.
Keep going.
A fort.
A fort. Yes, there you go. Yes. So I'm not sure that you'll get what fort is, but let's try Googling forts that are four-pointed star shaped. Or ninja star shaped forts in the US. It's also well maintained. Hmm?
It's got new-
Ninja
I can't speak.
Chris, what is that one?
And it is.
That's the one.
Hmm?
Definitely is.
So I'm thinking that maybe a lot of forts are star shaped.
Yeah, we're thinking about it. Fort preservation.
All right, now that Chris has scrolled through 20 star-shaped forts, I'm just going to tell you, it's Fort Stanwix in Rome, New York. So definitely some things are easier to determine than others.
Oh, we got more.
Yes, you did get fourth. That was huge.
I mean,
This is it, but tells me it's in Canada.
That one looks like it has more than 4 points. Yeah.
On the outlining of the walkways.
have you ever been to Castle Island?
I have not been to Castle Island. Where's that?
I think it's in South Boston. It's kind of like an octagon, or like, not like an octagon, but it's more like circular
Mhm.
than that. Let me see if I can get a picture. But it was like a fort in one of the forts.
Oh. Actually, I don't know if we can find it. Let's see if we can find it.
It's more of a country.
I know this is like the craziest thing you're ever going to hear. I got married on a fort. Well, not on a field next to a fort.
It's actually so cool.
Right here. This is Fort Witherall. I used to play here as a child, and my soon-to-be ex-husband and I both grew up on this island, Jamestown, and we both have connections to this area. This is where I got married, right near this building, which is actually bathrooms. And then this is the fort down here, and it looks out over the water because, right here, they wanted to protect Newport during World War II because it was a major port city. So they actually strung electrified nets from one side to the other. Yeah, to prevent German submarines from going into the bay, which is awesome.
The fort itself is called Fort Independence.
Fort Independence in Boston?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, huh? That's star-shaped too. Awesome.
But,
Well, yeah, so you can see the difference between this one and the surroundings and this one and its surroundings.
but this one's more on the cold.
Right. Yep.
I think that one also has actually.
Yep. This one has 5 points. So I guess this shape was pretty popular.
They do, a couple years ago, I went with, it was me and my siblings, my dad.
Mhm.
It was very, we were doing like a Halloween thing.
Ooh.
They like decorated, it was kind of like a haunted house kind of thing.
Haunted fort. That sounds fun.
They let you like walk around, well, not all, the whole thing, because there's parts of it that are closed off,
Mhm.
but like they had. And you could like go into like the middle, and they were kind of, I think they were like replaying what they would have done.
Oh, like a reenactment? That's really cool. That's an awesome, unique experience.
So they had like a bunch of like actors like dressing up.
Yeah.
It was pretty. We haven't done it in a while, but
Yeah, that sounds really fun. Well, hopefully things get back to normal and you guys can start going out and doing some more of those fun things. All right, so we have about 15 minutes left of class, so I'm going to go into the science of how remote sensing works. So this is all like the chapter 10 stuff. You're supposed to read 9 and 10. So, all right, how does remote sensing work? Science. When my kids were little, they would always ask me why, and then keep going with more and more questions. Why? So it would start off with like, Mommy, why is the sky blue? And I'd say, oh, it's how the particles are bouncing around. And they'd be like, why? And eventually I got to it because science.
the way it works.
So, speaking of particles bouncing around in the sky, that was a perfect segue. I'm so glad my brain went there. It's doing something right today. Any energy radiates from the sun through all of those particles and then bounces off the Earth and up to satellites. This is a terrible picture because you know what this shows? This shows active remote sensing. This shows the satellites beaming their own energy to Earth and sensors detecting it. That's not at all what we're talking about. We're talking about passive remote sensing, which is when the Earth's energy bounces off and the satellites collect the data. So all things on Earth emit radiation. So remote sensing works because radiation. For the Earth, the most emitted type of radiation is infrared, which is heat. For the sun, the most emitted type of radiation is visible light, mostly yellow and green. That's why when you look at the sun, it's like yellowy. This video is like the most boring video ever. And all it talks about how these waves, no, it's Mona! How the waves show different lights. So our visible light spectrum is right here. Between, I actually have that written down, 0.4 and 0.7 micrometers. It's a very small part of the electromagnetic spectrum. So why can we see the visible light and not other wavelengths? It's because how our eyes are designed. There's whole science behind that too, and it's cuckoo. The most important thing is information can be collected in all different wavelengths, such as microwaves. There's a whole lab at UMass Amherst that I do not work in, all this, that studies microwaves. And those images look like TV static. And they're able to detect stuff from that TV static. There's also infrared. We use this all the time. Infrared light will show us things like thermal stuff, color, shows false composite images, which I'll get to in a couple slides. The visible range, which we all see. Ultraviolet, which is the stuff that's dangerous and causes skin cancer, they think. Could just be their sunscreen. There's X-rays, which are very short wavelength and penetrate the body and bounce off bones really easily. There's also gamma rays, which are a more dangerous type of radiation.
Is that why? That was like I forget like a long time ago. It was the green. I forget. It was the watches. What? The green. Yeah. It was the watches. They were making. It was like a group of women, and they were making. Yeah.
Marie Curie?
No. Yeah, like they were all in the lab. They were working with like X-rays or something, and then they all like got this. Yeah. Or something, and then they were like so confused as to why.
Okay, there's this movie I want you to watch. It's called Radioactive.
That's what it was. It was like.
It's the story of Marie Curie, who created X-rays, and how she found new elements. It's all about her life. It's a great movie. So what about the atmosphere? Well, I'm trying to get atmospheric windows here. So the satellites collect, so the light bounces, the satellites collect data in a specific wavelength. So you can see these atmospheric windows here, these gray bars. That's where the wavelengths pass through the atmosphere and are not absorbed. So things in this range, in the white areas, those get either absorbed or reflected and refracted too much, so then they never make it to the satellites.
The bands that we primarily end up using are these 1, 2, 3, and 4, 4 being the infrared. To say about that, but that's okay. All right, so you can notice how different kinds of surfaces reflect strongly or weakly different wavelengths. So water, all in the blue spectrum, this is visible light here. These are infrared here. Maybe here. So water is all visible light, blue. Right. So soil has a different atmospheric band, shows up at different wavelengths. Dry soil and wet soil actually show up differently. And then vegetation has a couple of different peaks where it shows up better. So you can tell the type of land cover and the differences based on these reflectance values. This is actually called a spectral reflectance chart. And it refers to the item spectral signature. Everything on Earth has a different one. So how do you display this remotely sensed image? Once it's collected in all of these different bands, blue, green, red, near infrared, and all the rest of them, you have to transform it into something that can be viewed on a computer screen. So there's devices that are capable of sensing several wavelengths simultaneously. And actually on Thursday for Lab 10, we're going to be using a program that will take these different bands and put them into different image types. So the first type is a natural color composite. So that's, you label red, red, green, green, and blue, blue. So that's bands 1, 2, and 3. And you come up with an image like you're used to seeing. However, if you shift it to 4, 2, 3, and 4, bands 2, 3, and 4, you end up with a false composite image. So those plants that really have a high spectral signature in the near infrared band show up as this bright red. So let's see. Water, which is not really shown in this, actually shows up close to like black. All right, so we're going to go to landsatexplorer.esri.com, and we are going to play around. Where'd my mouse go? With some imagery. Oops. Go back to. Bounces you to a different thing. So I'll leave this up for a minute. I will put it on in the chat box too for those of you at home. So you can go to the website and we can play around with different satellite imagery. And just to let you know, Chapter 10 lab assignment is already up, so you can feel free to do it whenever you want. It uses a application called Multispec. The lab computer should have Multispec. If not, it is free software. There's a link in the lab document. Cool. So, Landsat Explorer. So you could, the first one is this wrench. Right here at the top, left-hand side of your screen. And that chooses the different rendering. So if you hit the question mark, it actually tells you a little bit more of the bands combination. So to see agriculture with vegetation as a bright green.
they use bands 6, 5, and 2. You can use all different ones. Color infrared is the one that I just showed you, where it's shifted so that the vegetation becomes bright red, which sometimes is easier for people to see, and the lakes become bright blue. So it really depends on what you want to look at.
Yeah, just look through the different band combinations and the question mark to find out what combination they're actually using. So if you go to this here. Those are clouds. Yeah. So Nora found Fitchburg and found some clouds, which look like nice big fluffy cotton balls. You can also do custom bands where you decide what you want to do.
It's so cool.
So this is your typical color shift. To stop the recording here while everyone plays around.